Reprise de débat. The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm happy to rise today to comment on this Budget Implementation Act, Madam Speaker. Canada is a country built upon optimism, often in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. But this promise of a better life has been eroding in recent decades. And the reality is that many middle-class Canadians have had their confidence shaken. While our economy continues to grow, middle-class Canadians are struggling, Madam Speaker. Many Canadians are working harder and longer as the cost of living continues to rise. Middle-class Canadians just don't feel as though they are getting ahead. It's time to recapture the hope and optimism for the future that existed in previous generations. We must embrace the spirit of those early founders and build upon their legacy by providing the same opportunities for advancement and mobility that they once unlocked. We already possess the keys to this future. Canadians are among the most highly educated people in the world, placing at the top of all members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. More than half of Canadians have a post-secondary degree. We are world-renowned for scientific research and discovery and can often be found on the cutting edge of clean technologies emerging right now on the world stage. We have abundant natural resources, outmatched only by the resourcefulness and diversity of our people. With interest rates at record lows, now is the time to make the investments that will invigorate the heart of our Canadian economy, our middle class, and those working hard to join it, Madam Speaker. This is no small undertaking. The challenges this budget identified cannot be solved in 1 year, but we can and we must take the next steps. Next steps that will focus on growing the economy for the long term in ways that will benefit every Canadian. The legislation we are debating today, Budget Implementation Act 2016 number 2, will complete the measures we introduced in Budget 2016, Madam Speaker. This is a budget that offers a fresh boost to the core of Canada's economy, Canada's middle class. Madam Speaker, the bill we are debating today will build a strong economy for Canada, and it will give the middle class and those working hard to join it more money in their pockets to save, invest, and grow the economy. This bill includes measures that build on Canada's economic and fiscal strength. This bill offers help for the middle class. This bill includes measures that protect consumers, and this bill ensures tax fairness and integrity. I'd like to, for a moment, Madam Speaker, discuss Canada's economic and fiscal strength. As I mentioned, many middle class and many Canadians are working harder, but not getting ahead. There is, Madam Speaker, a growing consensus in Canada and globally that governments need to invest, not only to boost economic growth in the short term, but to set the stage for long-term growth as well. Canada has the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio of any G7 country, and interest rates are at historic lows. Now is the ideal time for Canada to invest in its future success. I want to also talk about what this budget does to help the middle class. Obviously, we can all agree, I would hope, Madam Speaker, that a strong economy starts with a strong middle class. When middle-class Canadians have more money to save, to invest, and to spend, everyone benefits. A strengthened middle class means that hard-working Canadians can look forward to a good standard of living and a better prospect for their kids and grandchildren. When we have an economy that works for the middle class, we have a country that works for everyone. We must do for our kids and grandkids what our parents and grandparents did for us, Madam Speaker. Also important when it comes to growing the middle class is to make sure we help young Canadians succeed. Budget 2016 makes post-secondary education more affordable for students from low and middle class income families and will make it easier for students to repay student debt. It will also help young Canadians gain the much-needed experience and income and be in a position to find good jobs after graduation. Now, more than ever, it is important that post-secondary education remains affordable and accessible. Young Canadians must have access to meaningful work at the beginning of their careers and must not be burdened by increasing student debts. Budget 26 will address these concerns. Budget 2016 also improves the employment insurance regime. Canada's employment insurance program provides economic security to Canadians when they need it most. Whatever circumstances, no Canadian should struggle to get the assistance they need. To make sure that Canadians get the help when they need it, several changes are proposed to the EI system. Changes to eligibility rules will make it easier for new workers and those re-entering the workforce to claim benefits. The waiting period will also be reduced from 2 weeks to 1 week. This will provide unemployed workers with hundreds of dollars more at the time they need it most. Budget 2016 also improves the quality of life for seniors. The government, through Budget 2016, will make significant new investments to support seniors in their retirement years. Increased benefits will ensure that Canadian seniors have a dignified, comfortable, and secure retirement. Budget 2016 also has measures that support Canada's veterans. The Government of Canada has a social covenant with veterans and their families, a sacred obligation we must meet with both respect and gratitude, Madam Speaker. Our veterans have dedicated their lives to the defense of our country, and they deserve our unwavering support, as I'm sure all members in this House agree. The government will give back to veterans who have given so much in service to all Canadians. Canada will restore critical access to services for veterans and ensure the long-term financial security of disabled veterans. Canada's veterans will receive more local, in-person government services as well as better access to case managers. Madam Speaker, our veterans deserve nothing less. Budget 2016 also has many measures that will help protect consumers. Madam Speaker, Canadians deserve financial consumer protection in banking that keeps pace with their needs. In line with this, Budget 2016 contains plans to strengthen and modernize the financial consumer protection framework. This Act proposes to amend the Bank Act in order to strengthen and modernize the financial consumer protection framework. Canada's financial sector was resilient enough to weather the 2008 financial crisis, Madam Speaker, and we are seeking to build on this strength. We want to make sure the financial sector is able to adapt to new trends, including emerging financial innovation and technologies. What this legislation proposes to do is to consolidate and streamline existing consumer provisions into one new chapter of the Bank Act, and to introduce amendments to the Bank Act to enhance consumer protection in the areas of access to basic banking services, business practices, disclosure, complaints handling, as well as corporate governance and complaints and accountability. The federal government is exercising leadership by taking targeted steps to strengthen financial consumer protections. This includes measures to improve access to basic banking services, impose certain limits on business practices, and enhance disclosure to facilitate informed decisions being made by consumers. These reforms will reaffirm our government's intent to have a system of exclusive rules for consumer protection to ensure an efficient national banking system from coast to coast to coast. Madam Speaker, the budget also does much to ensure tax fairness and integrity. A fundamental Canadian value is one of fairness. This is why the Government of Canada is committed to a plan of action to combat international tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance that strengthens existing efforts at home and abroad and includes new measures. Under the Common Reporting Standard, Canadian financial institutions will be expected to have procedures in place to identify accounts held by non-residents and to report information on those accounts to the Canada Revenue Agency. Tax administrations in foreign jurisdictions will likewise collect information from their financial institutions about accounts held by residents of other countries, including Canada. The CRA will formalize exchange arrangements with foreign jurisdictions, having verified that each jurisdiction has appropriate capacity and safeguards in place. Then the financial account information will begin to be exchanged on a reciprocal bilateral basis. The introduction of the Common Reporting Standard is an important global development which will help enhance tax compliance and eliminate the opportunities for tax evasion. In addition, Madam Speaker, to this new legislative tool, Budget 2016 also announced $444 million in new resources for the Canada Revenue Agency to address tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. Going forward, Canada will continue to work with the international community to ensure a coherent and consistent response to tax avoidance. Madam Speaker, Budget 2016 and this Implementation Act are an important step, not only in the life of this government, but an important step in growing Canada's economy, preparing the Canadian economy for the future. To do this, Madam Speaker, Canadians know that our government must invest. Invest in infrastructure, invest in innovation, but most importantly, Madam Speaker, invest in Canadians. During the campaign, all of us were successful in being elected. And in part, I think, Madam Speaker, our success was due to listening to the voters in our own ridings. Otherwise, none of us, whatever side of the aisle we happen to be on, would be in this chamber today. Well, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we listened to Canadians. I know I certainly did. And in my province of Ontario, in my riding of Newmarket Aurora, there was concern with what was happening. There was concern with whether or not people's children and grandchildren would have the same opportunities that we did. I think, Madam Speaker, that this budget clearly addresses many of those concerns. Look for a minute at the Canada Child Benefit, which I think is an important social policy, but it's also an important economic policy. 9 out of 10 Canadian families are now receiving more through this child benefit than they were previously. The effect that this has, Madam Speaker, among other things, is that 300,000 young Canadians will be lifted out of poverty. That's 300,000 people, Madam Speaker, with more hope for the future. That's 300,000 people, Madam Speaker, that can participate more fully in the lives of their community, that can participate more fully in the opportunity that Canada offers to all of our young people, Madam Speaker. This is important, and it should not be overlooked. There are people in my riding to this day that stop me and thank me for taking this measure. I'm fortunate enough to live in a riding that is relatively affluent, Madam Speaker. But even among that affluence, Madam Speaker, there are pockets of need. There are pockets of want. Just a few weeks ago, I was honored to attend the opening of the Newmarket Food Pantry in my riding, Madam Speaker, and I was speaking with the executives and the great volunteers of that organization. And what they said to me was, although we're in Newmarket, although we're in this community that has so much wealth and so much prosperity, there's more users every month to the Newmarket Food Pantry. The need continues to grow, Madam Speaker. And I don't think anyone in this House, in fact, I know no one in this House thinks that's a trend that we want to see kept up. So, Madam Speaker, this is just one example, I think, of where some Canadians were feeling left out. Some Canadians were feeling left behind. And I was fortunate enough at that Newmarket Food Pantry to be asked to say a few words. And I was a little overwhelmed. I met many of the clients at the food pantry. These are hard-working Canadians. These are Canadians that struggle. A lot of them are single parents. A lot of them are single moms. I don't think anyone in this House wouldn't empathize or sympathize with people in this situation. So this Canada Child Benefit, Madam Speaker, helps the exact people that it's intended to help. At the food pantry, someone asked me to say a few words, as I mentioned, and I said, listen, I want to be around the day where the Newmarket Food Pantry and all of our ridings have food banks. I'd love to be around the day, instead of celebrating the opening of the new expanded food pantry, I want to be celebrating the closing of the doors of the food pantry. Not only in Newmarket, but the closing of the doors in all of our communities, of all food banks. Until that time, it's great to have volunteers and the great people that run these facilities. But I think we can all agree it would be much better to not need these facilities at all. And I know, Madam Speaker, that everyone in this House agrees with that sentiment. But that's why the Canada Child Benefit is so important. It's so important. It helps people who need it most. I can think of nothing more Canadian than that, Madam Speaker. And that's one facet of this budget, I think, that I'm very, very proud of. We see it every day, Madam Speaker. But this budget is just the first step in our plan, Madam Speaker. Of course, there's much more work to be done, much more work to be done. The other facet I'm very eager about is the investment in infrastructure. My municipalities, my riding, are growing very quickly. And frankly, they can't keep up with the population surge in some of the ridings. And there's a gap in infrastructure needs, not only in highways and sewers and wastewater, but even things such as broadband. We have many, many small and medium enterprises in my riding, Madam Speaker, that, believe it or not, even though we're only half an hour, 45 minutes north of Toronto, have issues with connectivity, which I think needs to be addressed, Madam Speaker, in all regions of the country. If we want to be part of the technological economy of the future, we have to make sure we invest now. And that's as much as infrastructure as highways, transportation, sewage and wastewater, or any of these other great infrastructure investments are, Madam Speaker. And I think Budget 2016 realizes that. There's much work to be done. There's much work to be done. I just want to discuss a little bit in the few minutes I have left about why this is a good time to invest. As I mentioned earlier, Madam Speaker, interest rates are at an all-time low. This is the time to borrow money. But it's not a time, Madam Speaker, to spend recklessly. The borrowed money must be invested prudently, and it must be invested with a view to a return on that investment, Madam Speaker. And many households, many Canadians borrow money. Most Canadians borrow money to buy a house. Most Canadians borrow money to buy a car. These are necessities, Madam Speaker. Therefore, taking on debt for important investments and expenses such as that, fundamental essentials of life, of course, is a prudent way of running one's own financial or household finances. The same applies to government, Madam Speaker. There's absolutely nothing wrong with borrowing money to invest in important projects that are needed by Canadians and that are needed by the Canadian economy, especially when those investments will yield returns into the future. That is what a responsible government ought to do, Madam Speaker, and I'm proud to be part of a government that is going to do just that. Investing now to build future prosperity for Canadians is something we should all be very proud of, Madam Speaker, and I know I certainly am. But Budget 2016 represents a strong first step in our plan to put people first and to deliver the help they need now while investing for the years and decades to come. With these investments and inspired by a sense of fairness, we are ensuring that Canada's best days lie ahead. I therefore encourage all members in this House to support this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.